name is Cora McCorvey, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority.
On Cora McCorvey's watch, a landmark lawsuit upended conventional thinking and changed people's circumstances. It was called Hollman, and it forged unlikely allies, unprecedented policy, and outcomes that are still uncertain.
I've watched this transformation, and I can tell you some days it's emotional for me to see what we have all done together.
Coming home. The projects on the near north side of Minneapolis were built in the 1930s to provide housing and jobs for poor people. But in the 1950s and 60s, politicians piled more public housing into beleaguered neighborhoods, and the New Deal dream turned ugly.
Lucy Hollman, our lead plaintiff, originally came to us because she had, it was just solid dirt outside in her backyard, outside her door, and so when it was wet, it was a complete cesspool, and when it was dry, it was just hard-baked dirt.
The North Side projects had been built on a swamp. They'd become segregated. There was no money to maintain them.
It made me mad.
What was it like living in there?
In the projects, I had a see-through phone. When you would talk on this phone, you would see the roaches walking around on my phone like they lived there. Well, they did live there, I guess, you know. So I had to tape them up in there so they wouldn't crawl in my ears. And
when I first moved over here, oh man, you couldn't hardly sleep at night. You could hear a lot of shooting, police running up and down the streets all night.
And we couldn't cross the highway after 5 o'clock to go to the grocery store because you would get either robbed. We would go in the house at 5 o'clock at sundown because we didn't want to have to put up with gunfire. There was nothing but Asians family and black families. There was no, like white families within the community.
Vanessa Boateng joined Lucy Hollman as one of 17 litigants in the lawsuit against the city, the Housing Authority, the Metropolitan Council, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
The reason we sued was because our clients, who were families participating in or waiting to get into the public housing program in Minneapolis and the Section 8 program, essentially had been deprived of the opportunity to live in a variety of locations in the metropolitan area because of intentional racial discrimination.
The Minneapolis lawsuit was called Hollman versus Cisneros, but similar lawsuits were filed in cities across the country.
There are also a lot of complaints about living conditions, very high rates of crime. Parents who were really afraid for their kids wouldn't let them play outside, were concerned that their kids were running with gangs, felt like there was a stigma attached to living in the project, made it very difficult to go and look for jobs, that their kids didn't see any role models in terms of adults working.
By the late 80s, movies and television shows reflected the project's bleak prospects. With the Clinton administration came consensus that the projects had to go, and the federal government would help make it happen. HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros invited the lawsuits, even though his department was a defendant.
My name is James Rosenbaum. I'm a United States District Judge. I had nothing to do with selecting the case. I just said, oops, some of them you can just tell this is going to make noise if you just leave it in a room all by itself.
We sought the NAACP's involvement in the beginning because we wanted a group to connect us to the community, and they did serve that purpose.
We saw it as a way of both integrating Minneapolis while also providing better quality housing for poor people in Minneapolis. The NAACP long considered itself and defined itself as an integrationist organization, and we feel that that's a good thing. We think it's good for people to live together, to learn to know one another.
We made a number of trips to Washington, D.C. to meet with top HUD officials. And, we had the intervention of political people, too, to help with the settlement, including Congressman Sabo.
It was after the 1994 election, where the House had changed dramatically. And frankly, we did not know what was going to happen to housing funds availability. And there was a sense of urgency that we get a settlement while certain resources were available.
And HUD was more than eager to sell it, $100 million. He said $117 million. We said, well, take it. Once we looked at the lawsuit, and looked at the resources that we could leverage to create new housing, understanding that the housing that currently existed on this very site was housing that had been here for 60 years, housing that had horrible problems with maintaining heat, and all kinds of very serious problems. So we saw that, and we said, well, this is better. We'll take lemon and make it into lemonade.
The settlement was announced April 20th, 1995. HUD would provide $117 million and 900 new vouchers that poor people could use to rent private housing. All 770 public housing units in the North Side projects would be demolished and replaced in diverse neighborhoods in Minneapolis and the suburbs.
Now, the partnerships in suburban jurisdiction was something that my former board chair saw as a necessary strategy. It was clear to me that I couldn't go in the various jurisdictions and convince those entities that they need to accept my residents.
So the MPHA used the settlement money to offer financial incentives to suburban partners. Those who made it work reflected on their success in a 2002 event.
The drivers of rental housing development then and now were the federal low-income housing tax credit and the subsidy money. And what we agreed to do as a group was to amend the guidelines that govern both of those things, to say that developments that have Hollman units were top priorities.
We were developing as a county in Washington County, developing all as high-end housing. People who worked in Washington County didn't have a place to live in Washington County. It just seemed like the appropriate thing to do from not only the social justice standpoint, but kind of the economic development standpoint. We'd take the units and we could get 30% of them for our own waiting list. So, it was a development grant we wouldn't get anywhere else.
On the site of the old projects, the settlement mandated an unprecedented new community that would be built with a mix of subsidized, affordable, and market-rate housing.
At the time, I was president of the Minority Contractors Association, and we also felt that it was important for the people that live in that community to be part of the rebuilding process.
So the agreement called for the highest rates of minority participation in Minnesota history.
25% minority participation, 10% woman-owned business participation. On a project of this magnitude, some $200 million was going to be spent redeveloping Heritage Park. And those contracting communities wanted to participate in that project, especially with those kind of dollars on the table.
The final dollar amount for the development of Heritage Park included a significant amount of private investment. SunAmerica invested nearly $27 million in the project.
Affordable housing is not only a good social policy, but it's good for businesses because it provides reasonable returns to the businesses as a form of an investment. We, as a tax-paying entity, are involved because we can take those tax incentives that the federal government provides, and we can monetize those by putting equity into these things. And so our involvement really is adding additional funds to make this public housing possible.
I couldn't believe my eyes that it was so fast. That, 60 years of a community could be, raised in just days. We're just like, whoa.
By the late 90s, while Sumner Field was razed and plans for the new development took shape, families who used to live in the projects moved to diverse communities. These so-called scattered site homes were indistinguishable from their neighbors. On the north side, Vanessa Boateng shared one with her 2 children.
And why you take the slaves off the tree? These were killed. That's why I put them on there.
And Ali Warsami moved to the south side with his wife and 9 children.
How's this new house? Tell us about it. What does it have?
In fact, it has a good space. You see the neighborhood also, it's fine. We are very happy with it.
Wa Vang and his family were among the first to choose home ownership. In Anoka County, 40 miles north of the city.
People over here treat us like we're different, but then I feel like I want to stay here because I have like more friends than I did first day of school I moved here. And I just feel that this is a good place for us to live.
For many people, the move wasn't easy, and not everyone went willingly.
Where to shoot ball? Jarvis, let's walk over here where to play ball.
Perry Hodges and his grandson Jarvis were among the last to leave the townhome.
There used to be a lot of kids and, in the area, and you hear a bunch of noise, they playing and stuff, and now, most of the lights is out back here, so it's kind of spooky at night. So.
Perry Hodges held out until spring 1999, when the townhomes were due for demolition.
Public Housing Authority was tearing down family housing as a result of the Hollman lawsuit settlement.
By summer, the high-rises were gone, and the townhomes were next. But plans to tear them down crashed headlong into the crisis in affordable housing.
The protesters, mostly African-American church leaders, begged the city to stop the demolition.
Bricks and mortar are easy to build up and tear down. But when you talk about valuing people as an asset, we usually take that for granted.
When the demolition protesters came and stopped the demolition, so I remember being at a meeting thinking, oh my goodness, I get this, but I don't know, I have a court order.
After a short stay in jail, protesters stormed the mayor's office to demand she stop the demolition.
First and foremost, we need to ask the mayor as a group collectively, stop the demolition.
And the mayor did.
But I think we can have no trouble stopping the demolition.
Thank you.
Now, so that.
And they came to me, now what do we do? The heating plants had been removed. The refrigerators were no longer there. There were no washing machine facilities. They were hulks of buildings. And they said, Judge, basically rebuild them and put homeless people in them. Homeless people were not what the Hollman case was about. They were about people who were wrongly housed, not homeless.
Yeah, there were some negative components to displacing people. But I knew that rising out of this public housing was going to be a great engineered community, one in which we all could be proud of.
The construction of Heritage Park went forward, and so did the relocation of the residents. Perry Hodges and Jarvis got what they wanted, a 2-bedroom house in a Minneapolis neighborhood, the type of housing that was in shortest supply.
He got friends at school, all colors, but he got certain ones that he really hang with, so. It's good for him, by him coming up now, to be in a mixed neighborhood.
She's 3 years old, and she likes to play with me so much.
I was offered to go back over in the new partners they're building, but I just don't think I want to go right now.
For the first time since disability forced him into public housing, Perry Hodges has options.
ZZ Top.
Here's a brochure for your family that gives you basically what the outlook of the project is going to be upon completion.
Former residents of the projects were the first to be invited to live in the new development.
Come in.
Spanning both sides of Highway 55 just north of downtown, Heritage Park will house 800 families, renters and owners, children and seniors, subsidized and financially self-sufficient.
What this is a dishwasher.
I don't know how to operate, probably I just use it.
So you're going to just wash dishes?
Heritage Park is an experiment. It was started with a very grand notion that people from many different incomes should come together, that we should not concentrate people in only one part of town. And this is the most grand experiment on that level, certainly in the city.
Oh, that could be lunch.
Mom?
Huh?
I found the spot for the 10 Commandments. I believe I'm going to put it right here.
Residents told me that they never thought in a million years that they'd be, able to return to things like no squeaky floors and because the mud room and blinds in the windows and dishwashers and, kind of spacious bedrooms, lots of closets, storage spaces.
The neatest thing is the washer and dryer. It's upstairs and it's completely quiet, and also they provide the house with it. That's something I've never seen done before.
I remember at one of the meetings that the families, some of the returning families were at, that they knew that they were going to be getting washer and dryers, and because it was something that I absolutely insisted on. And the residents said they were so happy that there was a woman that was in charge of this, understood how difficult it is, in the winter, in the cold, and you got 6 kids dragging your dirty clothes to a laundromat. I get that, and it's very powerful.
It's not a joy to be on public housing. Oh, they only pay 1/3 of their income, but we would love to work and get a good paying job, but it's just not like that. It's not easy like that.
Sonya and Clifford Watley are among those living the suburban life, thanks to Hollman. But if they could find housing in Minneapolis, they would.
That's where we grew up, and that's where our family is, and it takes a village, really to raise a child. I still instill those values in me, and it was just comfortable around there. That's where I'm comfortable, so I think they would have been more comfortable there too.
In moving 400 families to 30 Twin Cities suburbs, Hollman pushed almost everyone it touched out of their comfort zones.
That we have done something that has never happened before in the country, and done it in a really big way, because we're talking 500 units or more, and that's quite a bit of public housing.
10 years after the lawsuit was filed, the suburban partners reflected on their accomplishments.
I would like to start with a general question to all of our panelists. What is the biggest and most important lesson learned from 10 years of Hollman?
The parties of the lawsuit put aside the differences that prompted the lawsuit and decided that they were going to sit around the table and they were going to solve this problem.
So that within 9 months of the settlement being signed, we had the Met Council, the Family Housing Fund, the MHFA, all agreeing on a policy guideline that said this was a priority. And about a year after the settlement was signed, that resulted in the first 3 developments in suburbs getting commitments of funding.
And one of the main things that made this possible was changing the rhetoric. Talking about the real need for housing choices in our communities for all incomes and all age levels, and also talking about the real need for workforce housing.
At the anniversary celebration, Monifa Owens was Hollman's poster child.
Graduate from there and transfer to Metro, get my bachelor's degree in social work, minor in psychology, and then I'm going to go on to get my doctorate in psychology. That's my long-term goal, to be a doctor of psychology. I live in a beautiful townhome. It's in a wonderful community. My rent is only 30% of my income, so now I was able to quit the job that I didn't like and return to school.
3 years after the event, Monifa Owens still lived in Washington County, still went to school and worked, and still paid just 30% of her income for housing. She was grateful for what Hollman made possible, but she'd learned to adjust her expectations. Her new goal was to become a nurse and to help her children through their suburban experience.
It's terrible when your 4-year-old daughter comes home and tells you, my friend won't talk to me, Ma, because I'm black. How do you deal with that?
It was harder still for her older kids, whose schools were less than 5% African American.
Do you think that some people who go to Park or where you went to middle school are getting over their racism because they're realizing that, you're somebody and you're not just a stereotype?
It's getting worse.
What do you mean?
We have this group now called DWB, and they didn't have that before. So
what is that?
It's called the Dirty White Boys or something like that. And they don't like black people or colored people.
What are you supposed to do about that? What does the principal say when you talk to him or her?
They say they call the kid's mom, and then they call my mom, and they both come in at the same time and talk.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, sometimes.
So, if you could choose where to live, what would you choose?
I don't know, back in the city.
Monifa Owens was on a waiting list to get back to Minneapolis.
We're coming to take a peek.
Della Svenningson was waiting too, for a new baby and for her new home to be finished.
I'm loving it. It looks great.
One of more than 50 built by Habitat for Humanity in Heritage Park.
The house they were building is a lot of dirty with a little dust. The stairs where I write though, but the walls were so dusty.
My mother is Caucasian, my father is African American, and I really, really like the fact that everybody is gonna be joined and get to understand and know each other's cultural everything. And I'm gonna be neighbors with a actually Asian family, Ethiopian family, and an African American family. So I've got to meet them, and I enjoy it. I love it. But I've been around a lot of different people, but not like here, not like at Heritage Park.
In the end, Heritage Park exceeded its minority contractor hiring goal.
We worked with contractors on their estimates, on their production, so that they would succeed and that they wouldn't come in here and fail. And by and large, that's what I'm most proud of.
Instead of being confined to these large public housing projects in near North Minneapolis, those units are now located in a variety of locations throughout the metro area. People have a wide choice of communities in which to live, both in the suburbs and in the city of Minneapolis. And back on the site itself, we've got a spectacular new mixed income development. Shows promise of being, the kind of neighborhood all of us would want to live in.
There's some things we could have done differently. Some people have been moved for the better. Some people have gotten a new lease on life. Some people miss their friends. They miss their bus. They miss their dog. But by and large, I think that we've tried to accommodate as many people as we can, and we've tried to accommodate as many viewpoints as possible.
It's really not that popular these days to advocate and work hard for poor people. And that's what we're doing. People take pride in it, in a success story, and that's what this is. This is a big success story.
In a world where I think we give a lot of lip service to diversity and all of us being in it together, Heritage Park is one place where we can really say we are in this together.
Can mixed race, mixed income, mixed nationality housing work? I don't know the answer to that. Is the housing so desirable that it will inevitably drive up the prices of those units in a fashion that will make it impossible to maintain the mix? I don't know the answer to that. About 25 years from now, I should have some idea of how this thing worked out.
I got a beautiful home now. Something I dreamed to have. I never had it. But now, I got it. And I love it.
Secret weapon.
2-0, we're leading. Unstoppable defense. Number one quarterback.
Okay, you guys, give me your best shot.